Okay, it just said recording in progress. I'm muting again.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our Housing Element Community Workshop. This is our kickoff for the 6th cycle update to the County of Del Norte and the City of Crescent City's Housing Element Update. Unfortunately, my video is not working, but my name is Heidi Kunstel, and I am the Director of the County Community Development Department. And I will be the project manager on behalf of the county for this effort. We do have consultants who are assisting with the preparation of the update. And at this point, I will hand it over to them to do introductions.
Perfect. Thank you, Heidi. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I know it's an early meeting, and I can see on the attendance list, we're still having some more members join. What we're going to do is we're going to go through a presentation that'll outline the housing element this evening, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A at the end. So we're going to pull up a presentation and share screen. Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. Go to the next slide. So I just would like to start off with some introduction so you're familiar with who we have here on screen tonight who's presenting. My name is Brent Gibbons. I am the project manager for Mintier Harnish. Also here tonight is Jim Harnish. He's the principal and owner. And then we have Ryan Lester here, who is our assistant project manager as part of this update. And we also have Vanessa Blodgett with Plan West, who is assisting with the County of Del Norte's housing element update. Mintier Harnish, just to give a little bit of background, is a planning consulting firm. We're located in Sacramento, California. We're small. We focus on general plans, zoning code updates, and housing elements. So we've joined efforts with the county to help pull together this 6th cycle and then future implementation that comes out of this, which is typically pertaining to zoning amendments. So you might have noticed that tonight is not just a county effort, it is also a city effort. So we're joining forces with Crescent City as part of this. Obviously, Crescent City, located in Del Norte County, has a good working relationship with the county, and there's a lot of overlap when it comes to housing and how we implement new state legislation as part of the 6th cycle housing element. So I'm going to hand it over to Bob Brown with SHN to introduce the city's side of this effort.
Well, good evening, everybody. As Brent mentioned, I'm Bob Brown with SHN. I'm the principal planner at SHN, and we have been hired by the city as contract city planners for the last almost 2 years. And then we've also been hired to work on the housing element update. And with me on the team is John Olson, who's the city engineer and public works director, and my direct report and as a de facto planning director. So he's got a lot of hats to wear. I've also invited Megan Miller with the City of Crescent City Housing Authority, who will be sharing what she does later on in the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Bob. So before we dive deep into the presentation, we want to provide all of you with the contact information for the project manager for both the county's effort and for the city's effort. So Heidi, who kicked us off this evening, this is her contact information. So if you have any questions on this update, feel free to email Heidi or give her a call. Ryan later on in the presentation will point out some other methods that you can provide comments or receive feedback on this process moving forward. So I'll leave it up here for a second so everyone has the ability to take a screenshot or write this down. Perfect. Next slide. And then this is John Olson's on the city's end. So if you're within Crescent City and you want to find out more about this process, feel free to reach out to John. His contact information is here on the screen. I'll give this a second. Great, thank you, Ryan. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, if you're familiar with the housing element, this should sound familiar to you, and you should understand this process. If you have not gone through a housing element before, welcome. This is going to be your first dip in the water to learn about this process that the state of California mandates. So we're going to walk through housing element basics, what this means not only for Crescent City, but for Del Norte County, and how we're going to address this through the sixth cycle. We'll touch on some of the different facets of a housing element. So everything from your regional housing needs allocation, which for short is RENA, and we'll touch on what those numbers mean and the implications, and then how we implement those. We'll discuss housing needs in both locales, cover the project schedule so you're familiar with each of the updates and the timing and deliverables and what to expect next as part of both of these processes. We'll wrap it up with community engagement, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A and discussion. So if there's any questions you have on the process and what to expect, or anything about housing elements, we'd be glad to try to answer those for you this evening. So as we continue forward with the presentation, I'm going to ask Ryan Lester, who's our assistant project manager, to take the reins and lead us through this. Ryan?
All right. Well, thank you, Brent. We're going to jump into housing element basics here in this section. So what is a housing element? Well, a housing element is an element of the general plan. The updates to the housing element are required by state law in 8-year cycles, of which we're currently preparing the 6th cycle housing element. And it's important to note that updates are prepared on a schedule that's prescribed by the state. So what does a housing element do? Well, it provides an assessment of both current and future housing needs. It identifies opportunities and constraints on housing production, and then establishes goals, policies, and programs to meet the housing need. And then finally, it updates county or city, whichever it is, policies, programs, and regulations to reflect new state laws. And this is a big point in the 6th cycle, as we'll speak to in a minute. While other 4th and 5th cycle updates were, I don't want to say minimal, but by comparison, they seem so. There are so many updates in the 6th cycle for new state law, and we'll go through those in a minute. So the housing element works to identify strategies and programs that focus on a few key things: conserving and improving existing affordable housing, maximizing housing opportunities throughout the community, assisting in the provision of affordable housing, removing governmental and other constraints to housing investment, and promoting fair and equal housing opportunities. This last bullet is especially important in the 6th cycle, because HCD is requiring new sections of the housing element to discuss affirmatively furthering fair housing and fair housing opportunities. So one big section of the housing element is extremely important, is the housing sites inventory. And this is actually the section of the housing element that identifies the sites proposed to meet the housing need. So cities and counties aren't creating housing. What we're doing in the housing element is providing the land zoned for residential units. What you can include in the sites inventory, we can include planned and proposed projects currently, vacant land, underutilized sites, and accessory dwelling units. Now, the state says we have to address housing for all income levels and housing to meet the special housing needs of the county or city as defined within the housing needs section of the housing element. So then another section that's extremely important is the review of existing goals, policies, and programs. We don't want to just look at what's new. We want to look at what's been done and review those and see what to carry forward, what's been completed, and where we can find some innovative ideas to fill in the spaces in between. So as I mentioned before, there's a number of new state laws that affect housing elements. There's actually 2 slides here. This is the first. We've kind of highlighted some big ones, but as you'll see in these 2 slides, there are large updates to the housing element because there's so many topics here. So affirmatively furthering fair housing with AB 686, it'll be a whole new section of the housing element. And it has to apply programs, and it's very thorough, the requirements for this. No net loss zoning is also a big one. This actually requires us to provide more sites than the RENA, so that if any of them are rezoned that conflict with the housing element, we have extra numbers to cover that, and we can make sure that we don't provide, when that happens, we don't provide less residential land than we've said in the housing element. And then the safety element update to address adaptation and resiliency is now triggered by the housing element, and that's another big change. Here on this slide, accessory dwelling units, you can see the number of pieces of legislation that have come out. There are a number of updates that we have to think about as we are writing the housing element, density bonus, and then at the bottom here, standardization of sites, inventory analysis and reporting. This is more one of the technical ones where we can't just do the sites inventory the way we want to. They're asking us to report it in certain ways, use specific forms, and there's new requirements bound up in that. And then finally, evacuation route updates that are triggered with the housing element update as well are obviously incredibly important. So the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA. So what is the RHNA? So the RHNA is the projection of housing needs for all income levels in the county or city for the next 8 years. This is prepared by the Department of Housing and Community Development, and it's the goal for residential capacity that we're shooting for in the housing element. Now, in this sixth cycle, we can include units approved, permitted, or built between December 31st, 2022 and September 15th, 2030. So the planning period here is for the next 8 years. We're trying to plan for housing for the next 8 years. So we have a graphic here that kind of shows the relationship between the RHNA and the housing element. It starts with the state of California, who makes a RHNA determination for the region, and that's a number for the whole region, in this case, the county. And then that determination is passed down to the regional COG, or in this case, since Del Norte doesn't have one, HCD then has a staff that puts together a RHNA methodology to split up those units between the jurisdictions in the region. Those units get split up using a RHNA methodology, and they inform the local governments in updating their housing elements. They reach those goals, they submit their housing elements, and then those reports, those housing element reports, then inform the state of California's RHNA determination for the next cycle. So the RHNA, importantly, covers very low, low, moderate, and above moderate income categories. The state really wants to make sure that we are providing housing throughout the community for all income levels. So for the county of Del Norte, very low, 102 units, low, 75, moderate, 55, and above moderate, 154, meaning we have to provide capacity for 386 units in the unincorporated county area. And then for the city, Crescent City has a goal of 189 units with 39 very low, 22 low, 27 moderate income, and 101 above moderate income units. So you can see we have a total countywide of 575 units that we need to plan for. And importantly, more than 40% of those units are for sites that can accommodate lower income categories. On this side, I'll discuss the RHNA as compared to the fifth cycle. So the first line we have here is the fifth cycle housing element. You can see that in the fifth cycle, we were required to provide capacity for 233 units. And now in the sixth cycle, it's increased quite a bit to 386. This is a big increase, and but I will say that jurisdictions all over the state are saw huge increases in the sixth cycle, and this is not it's not out of whack with what we've seen statewide. So what's important here as well is the distribution of those units between the fifth and sixth cycle. So you can see here that even though the units increased between the fifth and sixth cycle, the breakdown of where the income categories that those units fall in is pretty consistent. This is actually a little unique that I've seen. We've seen, especially in urban areas, a heavy amount of the units end up in the very low and low income categories. They have to add a lot of density to meet those needs. So now I'm going to let Bob talk about the city's goals.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So again, very likewise, you can see the change between the fifth and sixth cycle. The fifth cycle, the city had a responsibility for a total of 77 units, and it has more than doubled to 189 for the sixth cycle. And percentage-wise, there's a reduction in very low and low housing units, and more of an increase in the above moderate income brackets. So anyway, those are the numbers.
Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Vanessa Blodgett with Plan West, and she's going to walk us through meeting those housing needs.
Thanks, Ryan and Bob. And yes, so how do we meet the RENA? There's numerous approaches, including streamlining permit processes, which could reduce constraints on housing production, providing additional support in housing programs, identifying additional housing sites, and increasing density and potential rezoning on either already identified sites to meet the RENA or identifying new sites to do those things. Next slide, please. And so for the site selection analysis, and I'll speak to what we are doing for the county, and Bob, feel free to jump in if there's anything you want to add for the city too. For the counties, we started with the prior fifth cycle housing element as our baseline, and started with that because there was a surplus amount of capacity identified at that time. And so we started with that. We then looked at what sites have been developed with housing since those were listed in the fifth cycle housing element, and we removed those from our list. And then we have been going through and analyzing each site to define their realistic capacity and determine the remaining development potential on that list. And then we are also looking at potentially new sites, and we're looking at all the kind of community areas within the county. So we're looking at some in Smith River and some in Gasky and some in Klamath area. So we're really trying to take an approach that provides housing in all the kind of or near the existing community areas. And then also another consideration is, if it's close to services, if there's water and or sewer, which is limited in, outside kind of the urban areas, and also being close to other services that are available in Crescent City in terms of social services and stores and all of that. So that is considered in our sites analysis too. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned, the fifth cycle capacity, showed over 1,000 units could be accommodated in various areas throughout the county. And for the sixth cycle, we need to accommodate 386. And those are, spread out throughout the income levels. And so we're going in and updating our lists and updating these numbers, and we are in that process right now. So we don't have anything figured out for sure, but we do anticipate having enough area. We are looking at sites that we could increase density on to accommodate more housing that are close to services and make sense to provide additional housing as needed. And next slide. I'll pass this one over to Bob if he wants to add anything.
Okay, so as Vanessa mentioned, this is from the fifth cycle housing element, and these were the vacant parcels that were identified. So we're still looking at that. I should mention that Plan West worked on an economic development strategy action plan. I'll mention a little bit more of it later, but it identified also some less than fully developed parcel sites, specifically in the downtown area. So anyway, so we do have some vacant sites there, and there still seems to be a constraints to development of those, and that's what we're trying to identify through this process. Next slide.
All right, so now we're going to go through our project schedules for each project. So for the county, we started with project initiation early this year. We're currently in the middle of the housing sites inventory and housing element update itself. And we'll move through CEQA compliance with the housing element. And then following the actual housing element, we are going to take on a number of additional tasks or phases, including implementing one or more of the programs identified in the housing element right away, going into implementation, working on creating objective residential design standards and by right development amendments. And these are to expedite planning approvals and to work to combat the constraints of time and cost in the process. And then phase 5 will go into environmental documentation. That'll be summer and fall of 2022. And then finally, the project will go ahead and work in the amendments to ordinance within the project. So all the amendments that we need to make to the code for consistency with the new housing element, we're going to jump right into those at the end of the project.
So Crescent City has a very similar process. I purposely left some of that language in there that at the end we're going to be the same place, but we're doing a slightly different approach. So our housing element, our 5th cycle housing element really had some good policies in it. Not much has changed since that time, and we think they're very appropriate. What didn't happen was implementation. So whatever the barriers were that prevented the policies and programs from being implemented, we're taking a closer look at those. So, some of the implementation measures were to appoint a subcommittee or to study this or to do things that just didn't forward the program objectives. And so anyway, we're looking at the program and really trying to identify, again, through stakeholder interviews and other processes, looking at how we can change and implement our 5th cycle element. And then when we get to the 6th cycle element, we'll be much better prepared to address some of the issues. In that implementation, we're identifying barriers. We have an ADU ordinance, an accessory dwelling unit ordinance that is almost ripe to be able to put towards public hearing process. We also have some pre-approved ADU designs that are being reviewed by the building department, and those pre-approved designs, if they meet the building code, people can utilize those designs and shortcut through the building permit process and go ahead and develop those designs. So these designs are being developed up and down the state, and it's not just the ones that the city has, but others can be used, but they would require conformance with the city building codes. So and we're also involved in streamlining the development process and looking at our zoning ordinance for amendments, incorporating mixed use in the downtown area. And trying to make that in a more ministerial process as opposed to requiring use permits, which is the current case right now. So, and then we really want to get more in the community involvement. For us, this is almost like the kickoff meeting. We had been hoping to do some more live type functions with some of the city's events. And of course, COVID has kept us from doing that. So we hope as things lift that you'll see more about the housing element in the city of Crescent City soon. So, and then step 3, we start looking at the 6th cycle housing elements. We've already looked at some of the housing needs assessments and some of the information that we have. So we're in the midst of that. And objective residential design standards are coming. The HCD is also developing some templates. We particularly requested them to look at appropriate standards for rural areas, where most has been urban areas so far. And then we'll be doing these housing element approval for the 6th cycle, going through the public hearing process and the CEQA compliance for that document later at the end of next year. Next.
All right, so next we're going to talk about community engagement and the efforts we're making as part of the housing element updates. So for the county, we will have 2 planning commission and board of supervisors study sessions. We're going to have 2 workshops. Tonight's one of them. And we will have 2 planning commission board of supervisor hearings. These are the events. We also did stakeholder interviews earlier in the year this year.
Likewise, we are currently doing more stakeholder interviews. Some of the information is showing that we some of the barriers seem to be financial in whatever form that might be. And so our financial partners, whether it's the grant funding or the banks or other loaning institutions, are important players or stakeholders in this process. So as I mentioned, we do have an ADU ordinance soon to go for public hearing before the Planning Commission. And then we have some Planning Commission and City Council study sessions coming up. We're hoping to get some more community workshops, again, live, so that we can present information as well as work with potential applicants on specific projects. And then Planning Commission and City Council hearings. And I did mention the economic development strategic action plan. So in that, trying to jumpstart the downtown area was a very high priority project. There were 12 recipes, as they were called, that related to housing, and the city sees that as a strong economic incentive for the city. Next.
Okay, and then as far as public information and participation for the county, we will be releasing newsletters. We've released one already. We have a website, housingdelnorte.com, social media, stakeholder interviews, like I mentioned, and then continuing to work with local groups, virtual events such as this, online surveys, and then study sessions and hearings. So once again, housingdelnorte.com, please hit the website and sign up for the email list, please.
For the city, again, you can see this. Probably key to this is the Facebook page, where people can stay up to date on information that is well used at the moment, and it's a good place to look for additional information and to provide comments that will be followed up on. So make note of that Facebook page. I'm sure many of the people in Crescent City already know it. And Megan, this is like Megan, just to share what's on this slide and talk about the City Housing Authority.
Sure, thank you, Bob. I have some information here, just general program information. We have a low-income rental assistance program. We are a department of the city, but our jurisdiction spans the county. So we've got families in all different parts, from Klamath, Crescent City, Fort Dick, Cayuchi, Smith River, and Gasky. Our funding comes from the federal government through HUD. We have 590 traditional housing choice vouchers, 28 HUD-VASH vouchers. Those are vouchers that are designated for homeless veterans, 40 mainstream vouchers. Those are vouchers that are targeted for families that have at least one member who is non-elderly and disabled, and 15 emergency housing vouchers. And those are vouchers that are for individuals who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. And basically how the program works, the participants select units from the private rental market, and they pay a portion of the rent to the owner based on their household income and composition, and then the housing authority subsidizes the remainder. And applicants are selected from the waiting list on a monthly basis. We've got a really short waiting list, and it replenishes every month. We get new applicants, which demonstrates a need for, continued demonstrated need for housing assistance. And just one little mention that we were awarded as the Housing Choice Voucher Program of the Year in 2020 and the HUD-VASH Program of the Year in 2020. I have a very talented and hardworking staff, and it is reflected in that award.
All right. So then newsletters, we have posted one newsletter for the county to the website. And the second newsletter will come with the public review draft housing element. Now, if you head to our website, there's a couple things. First here, this orange button here at the top on the right-hand side says join email list. Please click that. It'll pop open a little window. You can put your name and your email in, hit submit, and then you're on the email list. And then right below it, there's a button that says comments. You can click that, use that to leave us comments at your convenience, day or night, doesn't matter. All through the project, we will get those immediately. They come right to our email immediately, and we take them very seriously. So please leave us your comments, even if it's small, even if it's, hey, there might be an opportunity on this site. Let us know, please. And then at the bottom here, we have an accessibility widget. If you click this the little guy that's in this box here, it'll open up this accessibility menu, and there's some accessibility options for you in case you need them, so that you can review the website at your own comfort. There's also up here where it says select language. If you're a Spanish speaker, you prefer to read the website in Spanish, just click on that and you can change the language to Spanish.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan and Bob, Vanessa, and Megan. I do want to echo the website. On a lot of projects that we handle, we do have project websites, and one question we typically get is, if I submit a comment on there, do you actually get it or do you actually read it? And I will say we do. Every comment that comes in goes into our inbox. For the county's side, Heidi gets a copy of it. And so any time of the day, I get some of those where someone gets a thought at 2 a.m. and ding goes my phone and there's a comment on a housing element. So we do get those, we do log them. And then for transparency purposes, we do provide those to your elected and appointed officials throughout the update so they can see what your thoughts and expectations are for this project. So I do invite, if you're interested in the county side, look at Housing Del Norte. If you're interested in the city's side of the housing element, go to their Facebook page where there'll be a lot of information that can update you through this project. Now, I know tonight was a lot of information. There's been a lot of changes between the 5th and 6th cycles. It can seem like an overload. I know as us as planners trying to digest all the legislative changes, there's a lot to become familiar with. So as part of this evening, what we'd like to do is open it up for discussion with any attendees who are here with us tonight. If you have any questions relating to not only the process on the county or the city's end, but any of the inner workings of how a housing element works, or how we're applying it, or what are the implications of a housing element? What is the enforcement of a housing element? All of us here on the panelist end can answer those questions and help provide any further feedback. I do want to point out that this is being recorded. This will be provided later on each of the respective sites. We will document any questions that come in and then also respond to those in a memorandum as well. So your comment is not only recorded, but we're going to memorialize it and document and post it. So those who are not able to attend tonight have the ability to watch the video and then see some of the comments and suggestions that were brought forth. So on the next slide, what we'd like to do is start with two big questions. And these are meant to be really high level. These are meant to be an icebreaker of a sort to try to get the juices flowing. So from tonight's discussion, are there major housing issues or concerns that any of the attendees see, whether it is in the county, outside of the city limits of Crescent City, or are there any issues within the city? And the way that we can take comments or facilitate this discussion tonight is if you do have some thoughts or some questions or just any comments on both housing element processes, what you'd want to do is on the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand feature. You can click that. And then on our end, we'll see your hands raised and we will unmute you and you can ask your question of the group or provide any feedback or comments. So if you have any comments, feel free to raise your hand. I saw a hand raised and then it went down. Let's see, there's one. And then Paula, if we can unmute and elevate, I believe it's Lupe, please.
Yes.
Hi, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I noticed that the city only has a Facebook page, and I'm concerned because I don't have Facebook and I would like to access and or make a comment. I'm wondering if there's a way that the city can create a website like the county.
Can I chime in, Bob?
Please.
So all right. I'm John Olson. I'm city engineer and the lead of the planning community development director. So you can go onto our website. My email address is posted there boldly, and you can email me directly. You can also call City Hall and leave them a voicemail for us. We will treat them just like the county will. Those comments, they'll all be recorded. They'll get over to Bob Brown with SHN, who's taking the lead on our housing element. So yeah, I would be happy to take your comments.
Well,
Due to some budget constraints, we don't have a website set up.
I'm just wondering about accessing all the information that would be available. Is that just on Facebook, or does your website actually have the housing element information on your website?
Great question.
Yeah, we do have the fifth cycle housing element if you'd like to review that, but maybe even more important, Lupe, we'd like to get your contact information and we would keep you abreast directly of all of what we're doing as events are planned.
Okay, that's great. And for clarification, since I'm still on here, I was wondering about your stakeholder interviews. You guys admitted you were a little behind on that, but I don't quite understand who are your stakeholder interviews? How is that decided?
Well, I have a collection of names that I've been contacting, and part of that process is also asking the question of who else should we contact that might be interested.
Okay.
I'm putting you on my list, Lupe. I'm going to follow up with you.
Okay, well, I was just interested in it just because I don't know who the county stakeholders are as well, and I was wondering about that. And then my last question would be on the fifth housing element. There was a report, obviously, that was made on both city and county, and I just am wondering if I'm understanding it correctly. You take the fifth housing element report and you're using information from that to develop the sixth cycle. Is that correct?
So I can speak to that a little bit. The housing element updates in past cycles have been more minimal, to where you could take your fourth cycle element and literally start updating it. So for the fifth cycle, you could take the new data that you have for your, because it's 8 years later, and you just start updating it. In this cycle, we're going to have to go a lot deeper. So it may look, portions of the housing element may look very much the same as in the fifth cycle, just with updated data. But then there will be whole new portions in the sixth cycle, including affirmatively furthering fair housing and others. So it's a little more than just a small update. It's a pretty comprehensive update of the housing element. And then just on your question about stakeholders for the county, we interviewed, I think, 15 or 18 stakeholders, not just developers, although we did speak with a number of developers, but also housing advocates, health advocates, anybody we could get a hold of. We did, I think, we spoke to at least 6 or 8 people that we hadn't even planned on initially. We were asking that question of who else should we talk to at the time.
And as part of those stakeholder interviews, the list was developed in collaboration with county staff. So it wasn't a list that we, the consultant team, just developed. we looked at local housing advocates, developers, those who use the regulated ordinances locally that are used to residential development, and that's how we approached it. The county provided a list of individuals that they felt would be best fit to help provide some guidance in this process. And then we finalized our list. And as Ryan had said, we hosted about 16 to 18 different stakeholder interviews. Those interviews were just not with one individual person. Sometimes they were more of a roundtable discussion with a larger group. So that's how the county has tackled the stakeholder interviews. Jim Harnish, I see that you came on screen and unmuted. Did you have something to add regarding stakeholder interviews or the difference between the 5th and 6th cycle?
Yeah, I would just add a little bit to each one of those. On the stakeholder interviews, this is to help the consultants kind of get an initial understanding of what some of the housing issues are. It's not a comprehensive assessment of the housing needs in the county. So it's to help us get started and understand kind of the background so that we have more information about the key issues to address. So it's not a comprehensive list of everybody who's interested in housing. I just wanted to make that clear. And secondly, on the difference between the 5th and 6th cycle, Ryan is correct. The 6th cycle is a much more complicated approach, but the 5th cycle housing element, we still look at that in terms of what the successes have been, how that's been implemented, and build on that for the 6th cycle. So there is a connection between them in terms of assessing what worked and what didn't, and what we can go forward with on the 6th cycle that may be more effective in helping see housing developed in the county.
Well, thank you very much for your information. And Ryan, we did sit in on one of your stakeholder interviews, so thank you for that as well. I'm actually wondering if that stakeholder interview information was put somewhere in the website or feedback on that. So that's one question. The other one was, I noticed that Cora had asked if this power slide was going to be available for us somewhere. And then, because I noticed real quickly, you guys had a list of AB and Senate bills, and one of them was on transition and emergency housing. And so it looked like a lot of information that was just line item on your power slide, that it would be good to do maybe a little bit more research. So again, thank you for your hard work. I really appreciate it.
Sure, and I thank you, Cora, for putting the chat in there for everyone to see. The presentation will tonight we will make public. The city will have a copy of the PowerPoint. The county will as well. So on the county's end, we will post it to the Housing Del Norte website. It'll be on the home page and for the remainder of the project. So if you do want to go back and look at that as a point of reference, you can, and then we'll provide a copy to the city as well.
And Brent, just to add to that, we're going to post this, we're recording this workshop, and that will be posted as well.
Correct.
And I'm really sorry that we couldn't go into each one of those pieces of state legislation further. Each one we could talk for over an hour on each one. So we make sure to, in the housing element, when we get to a section that's affected by state law, we make sure to say what the government code is and how it affects the housing element before we report on it as well.
Okay, so thank you, Lupe. Paula, I think we have another hand. Cora.
Cora, you've been unmuted.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for hosting us today. My name is Cora Rose. I'm an attorney at Legal Services of Northern California. And as some of you know, we serve residents in Del Norte County and Crescent City who are seniors or who have low incomes. And so that's the viewpoint that we bring to discussions of the Crescent City and Del Norte housing elements And so I just wanted to mention that we did receive an invitation to comment from a Crescent City Council member. And so we're looking forward to participating in the Crescent City housing element process. And the focuses, the foci that I think that are of particular interest to us at this moment include what Lupe mentioned, which is the implementation of SB 2 on transitional and emergency housing, which we've seen such an increased need for, I think, with the pandemic and the wildfire evacuations affecting kind of our cooler, wetter corner of the state. And also looking at affirmatively furthering fair housing, including access for folks with disability needing ground floor or accessible units, which aren't necessarily features that are present in older housing stock, as well as the concerns of our senior client base, who by and large are relying on older housing stock that may be substandard or needs significant rehabilitation. And I believe in the 5th cycle elements that there was some discussion of implementing programs for rehabilitation of existing housing stock. And we haven't really seen a lot of opportunity for Del Norte or Crescent City residents to make real those good good feelings towards rehabilitating existing stock. And I know that the focus here is on finding quite a few new sites, but we would encourage there to be some emphasis on implementing programming to rehabilitate existing housing stock, whether that be mobile homes or existing single family homes.
There is the opportunity. I know the state has been pushing this as the accessory dwelling unit and the junior accessory dwelling unit. So those are opportunities. The state is recognizing that most of the areas in the state are already developed. So how can they promote other opportunities to increase housing on those sites? There was also a Senate Bill 9 that was just signed that will talk about the single family residential zone properties being more than just single family residences. So stay tuned for that.
Great, thank you, Bob. And Ryan, I could see you taking notes while I talk, and nothing makes me happier. So thanks very much. And thanks again for this opportunity. I'm glad that we're doing this by Zoom so that folks across the county are able to participate this evening.
Perfect,
Thank
you.
Cora, don't forget me. I'm taking notes too.
Oh, good, Jim. Just not as obviously.
I see Bob's papers too, so we're on a roll.
I'm getting new stakeholders, and actually anyone who attended tonight's meeting on such a beautiful evening must be a stakeholder of one sort or another. So we hope we hear from everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Cora. And Paula, I see we have a Mr. Hamilton.
Mr. Hamilton's been unmuted.
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I know John's there. Hi, John. So I've got some property that I'm going to be closing on here real soon, and I want to do something. I want to collaborate with you guys or the city, somebody. So how do I get a meeting face to face where we can sit down and talk about it? That's kind of what I need to know. And then I've also got other projects and things that I want to bring forward, but 3 minutes is really tough. I'd like to be able to have some sort of a powwow session or something like that with, the public or, some of you guys.
If your property is located within the city,
yes,
call City Hall and make an appointment. That's how difficult it is. Then we can sit down and talk about some of the details, and then we can gather information that's needed, and then I can get you with our planners, and we can show you what the options are.
Great, I will do that. I've also got a couple of other projects that are probably to do with the estuary that I don't know how close you guys are to implementing something there, but there's a program coming out. I think the first application process is the 18th of October that I would like to discuss with someone as well to help me maybe put together a plan for that for another piece of property that I have. So I will probably just make that appointment after I talk to somebody with my first project here. So yeah, that's what I needed to know. Other than that, do we have a quota of how many of these housing units we need to satisfy the state?
And then Bob, did you want to answer that on the city's end?
It was in the presentation. I'll flip back really quickly.
I think the total for the whole county was 575 and the city was
189.
189.
And do they want like people with granny quarters in the backs of all their houses? That you want them that way, or do they want them multiples?
I
so
think it would depend on where it's located, but those options are available.
And as a city and a community, how would we want them? Do you think?
I think that's a good question, but I think maybe more so is what is the barrier that's keeping up yourself and other people from going ahead with that?
Well, I think it's participation. I think it's communication, and I think it's involvement as well. We need to get the city people, not employees, the community involved. And I don't think just volunteerism and that kind of thing is going to work. I think we gotta come up with some programs that are going to put some money in people's pockets somehow. And I've got a couple of ideas for that as well. And I just think it's an aggressive way to think. But we're in new times now. It's not the same as it was just a couple of years ago. So we got to think as a unit instead of individually, I think. And I think that's a smart way to look at the future. And I'm an old guy, so I would be implementing this for the younger generation of Crescent City, of course, because that's what I'm focused on. So,
well, I have to say, Mr. Hamilton, we collectively as a group run a lot of housing element meetings, and I can say you're probably one of just a few who has ever come up with some really innovative ideas and suggestions and wanting to help where you can. So I appreciate you jumping on here. This has been fantastic. It doesn't happen very often, so it's exciting to see community members stepping up with some different ideas and willing to come to the table, because the housing element, I mean, it is a community driven plan. It is state mandated, but the community does have some say in how and where these properties are located and the direction they move. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And like I said, I have some other stuff too that'll get the juices flowing, I think, and not only members of these kind of groups, but also citizens. So
please send us your comments. If you're willing to use the website, please send us your comments. We'd love them.
I will do that. I didn't even know there was a place to do that. So, and I don't have Facebook either, so I'm kind of an old schooler. Once I figure it all out, I'll get in the swing. I'm a lot better at just sitting down with somebody and talking to them though. That's just that's just the way I am. But thank you guys, and you'll be hearing from me.
I look forward to it.
Okay.
Great, thanks. Okay. Looks like we have John.
Mr. Wendt, you're unmuted.
Hi, thank you for being there. First of all, I intended just to listen and become better informed this evening and not provide input, but I'm wondering, level of interest, do you have a tally of the number of us out here tuning in?
Currently, there are 8 attendees on.
8 attendees? Okay, thank you. That's all.
And Paula, if we can mute those attendees. Perfect. So we've had some good comments, good suggestions, and good questions come out of this. I guess I wanted to throw out another question, and you might have some input or you might not, but we'll give it a shot. So we in our PowerPoint, we'd also like to know if there are any priorities that you think either the city or the county should put forward when addressing housing issues or concerns. Even though both the city and the county obviously share a mutual boundary, they work hand in hand on several things. They both are different though, and they both have different needs. And so are there any priorities that you think either one should take through this effort?
I would like to mention, this is Lupe Gutierrez again. I would like to mention that a consideration perhaps should be landlords who have housing already that may be in great need of repair. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because they may not be financially set to do those repairs themselves. And is there something?
Whoops, you got muted.
I'm just wondering if there's anything that helps the landlords to help with their rehabilitation of poor housing.
Okay.
Well, I can't answer your question immediately right now with, yes, there's this money and this money out there. Certainly, we've seen a number of programs in housing elements to pursue those kind of things and to commit the city or county to going and searching out funding and trying to seek whatever they can. Certainly we will, as the housing element is being written, we have to do research into those types of things and report on funding availability sources. That's part of the housing element. But we could certainly look into that, and that's a great comment. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd like to know if maybe somebody there has an answer of how many houses the city owns.
So I'll speak to it. The city doesn't actually own any houses or provide any housing directly. Like Ms. Miller presented, the Crescent City Housing Authority supplies vouchers. So we rely totally on the private sector to construct housing and to regulate the rent of it. What we do is through the housing, we provide vouchers to folks so that they can get housing that they might not otherwise be able to afford.
Now that's the HUD program, correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, I've been involved with that before, and the problem with that is that there's not enough money. You can't get enough rent.
Yes, that has been an issue in the past. We've worked to address that though, and our payment standards now, which control the amount that we can pay on behalf of families, are set at 100% of the fair market rents. So,
okay.
So please call me if you have.
Yeah, that makes a really big difference, because that was my problem with some of my other rental units is HUD just didn't pay enough, and then you had to like undermine HUD with asking for more money from the tenant, and then because that's the way they come at you, because it used to be that way anyway. So it was a really sticky, it felt icky kind of a program to me when I used it before. It's it's great, the checks come in the mail every month, that's fine if you're a landlord, but it got to the point where it was not meeting the local rents, so it just didn't make sense. Plus you do have to mind who you're putting in there, and because people tend to not take care of things as well when it's not all theirs, I guess I would say. But so that's an issue too with HUD. But yeah, if you guys have done something like that, then that makes it a whole different program, a whole different thing. And Jonathan, on your comment about zero properties, I got something to chat with you about. I think I don't know if I'm misinformed, but I think that number might be a little different than zero. I don't know what if it was to the county or what, but someone that I know was working on getting hundreds of properties that were coming right to the city because of lost paperwork and stuff like that, abandoned homes and stuff. And I guess we can have that discussion, off camera, I guess, because I want to know if my information that I have, is accurate or not, because I was under the understanding that Crescent City owned a bunch of houses, a whole bunch, not just a couple, a whole bunch. So, that's another discussion, I guess. But anyway, yeah, thanks to you guys. And the HUD thing is really good. That should, you guys need to advertise that or something, because I wasn't aware of that. And I don't have any more rental houses, but I was not aware of that. And that makes it a whole different ballgame for landlords, because that was the big problem. But just wasn't enough money. But if it's up to what you guys say now, so that's great, good. And I think the biggest problem we have is the campers and the homeless people that are on our streets. I think should be a number one priority for county, city, and residents. Everybody needs to be concerned about that. If we don't take care of it now first, it'll come back to haunt us. So I've got a program for that as well.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And Cora.
Sure, thank you. Two concerns that our client group have raised for us is the difficulty of finding places for their RVs or mobile homes as parks are being turned to tourist use from residential use. And so, possible regulations restricting the conversion or ensuring adequate retention of spaces for RV parking and mobile home parking, I think would be helpful. And also folks who are receiving no cause eviction notices for single family homes being converted from residential use to tourist use. And so ensuring that the housing sites inventory is taking into account residentially zoned locations that are actually being used for residential purposes, I think would be something to address that concern that's been raised. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So are there any other thoughts or questions from the attendees tonight on the process, or any expectations for either the city's process updating the 6th cycle or the county's process?
Is a list going to be made available of the sites that have been proposed?
Yes, and on the counties, and Vanessa, do you want to speak to the housing sites, at least on our end, and then Bob on the city's end?
Yes, so the sites inventory and all the sites will be a chapter or attachment, however it's in the end comes out, but will be part of the housing element, and it will be released with the draft housing element. But we can also, when we work through it with the county, so we have to work through the sites with the county, and then it will be incorporated into that draft housing element.
And excuse me, Vanessa, when you say draft, does that mean there will still be allowable public opinion on that draft then?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa.
Mm-hmm.
And then just for the city, half the 5th cycle housing element currently has the vacant parcels map in it. This was also added to in the Economic Development Strategy Action Plan for undeveloped parcels. So those are both currently available, and we haven't started the process, but we'll soon be going through and updating it, mainly for identifying parcels that were shown to be vacant but are now developed on.
And that's a good point. Thanks, Bob. The county's 5th cycle housing element is available on their website, and has I believe it's chapter 2, has the prior cycle sites inventory that we have used kind of as our baseline and are building on that.
That's really great to hear.
Great. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Bob. Brian, do you mind pulling up the PowerPoint?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I want to appreciate, just say thank you to everyone who came out tonight. As was mentioned, it's a beautiful night. So if you're here with us, then I really appreciate you, because I'm sitting here in my house looking outside, and I'm not up in Del Norte County right now, but it's still a beautiful night here. So thank you all for joining us. I just wanted to go over just a few things, just our next steps as they pertain to the county, and then I'll let Bob touch on next steps on the city's end. So for the county, we're focusing now on data collection and assessment. So we're pulling all data that is going to be incorporated as part of the housing element, and that will influence its outcome. And then we're going to assess that data, which will ultimately inform goals, policies, and programs as part of this 6-cycle effort. For the county right now, we're starting our preliminary take at housing sites inventory. Plan West, as part of the county's team, has already started that. We've collaborated with Heidi and her team, looking toward other sites that we can count for this 6th cycle. So that's already begun. And then the third part that is following that is we like to do what's known as an audit. So we review the status of existing 5th cycle from the last cycle housing element, goals, policies, and programs. Some of them may need to be updated. Some of them may be working and we want to pull them forward, and others just might need some minor tweaks. So we'll do an audit of that as part of this effort. Bob, do you want to touch on the next steps for the city?
Sure. I think most important right now is the stakeholder questionnaires. So, some of the questions that are asked is, what is the type of housing most needed in Crescent City at this time? Or why doesn't there seem to be more of a demand? Why aren't people coming forward with projects? Since we do have vacant properties, we have property owners, we have empty storefronts. So, trying to answer some of that. What's the most common barrier for development in that area? And what's the best role that the city, and in this case, the county, could do to remove those barriers? So we're looking for answers to that, and we hope to get that through our stakeholder interviews.
Perfect. Thank you. So just to, on the bottom of this slide, you'll see that we have the links to the city's Facebook page, which will provide updates on the city's housing element. There's the link to the county's project site, which provide updates on the county's effort to update the 6th cycle housing element. I just ask that if you have any information or want to know about the project, look toward both of these sites. At the beginning of the presentation, we did put forth both of the project managers for the city and for the county. So feel free to reach out to them with any questions you may have. We'll be glad to answer those through the process. And just realize this is just the beginning of the engagement effort on both ends. So tonight is not the be all end all. You can submit as many comments as you want throughout this process. Each effort has about another year to go. So we still have some time. Look forward to noticing for future engagement events, and then other draft deliverables that'll come out for public review, so you can provide further comments on that. So that concludes tonight's presentation. I just want to again thank everybody for joining us, and we look forward to working with both the city and the county moving forward. Okay, have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you attending this evening. We really appreciate it and look forward to hearing from all of you.